A word from our sponsors. Hattie Group has been partnering with top ad tech companies to fill their most important roles for over a decade. Their expertise lies in placing the best candidates, ensuring you efficiently and effectively build your strongest team. Imagine having a team that's not only skilled, but also perfectly aligned with your company's culture and goals. Hattie Group understands the unique challenges of the ad tech industry and are dedicated to helping you focus on what matters most, your technology and your clients. Their rigorous recruitment process ensures you get top-tier talent, allowing you to stay ahead of your competition. To learn more, visit them at hattiegroup.com. That's HATTYGROUP.com. This is a disclosure. Please note that all guests featured on the AdTechGod pod are invited to participate. They do not pay in any form to appear on the show. However, guests may be sponsors of the AdTechGod community, the AdTech Forum, or other product offerings. Welcome to the AdTechGod pod, your window into the world of advertising technology and the people behind it. I'm your host, AdTechGod. Welcome back to another episode of the AdTechGod pod, the podcast where we meet the monetization leaders of our industry. I'm your host, AdTechGod. We're thrilled to welcome Ryan McConaghy, currently the Vice President of Global Monetization at Conde Nast. You might also know him by his widely recognized moniker, Happens in AdOps. Ryan's career is impressive. He has an extensive background in the media and advertising industry, having held multiple roles at highly recognizable companies such as The Atlantic, Daily Motion, Warner Brothers, The New York Times, and those are just to name a few. With his wealth of experience and deep insights into ad operations and monetization strategies, Ryan has become a leading voice in our industry. I'm personally really excited to meet Ryan, not only for his experience, but to hear about his journey and experience running Happens in AdOps. Ryan, I'm super excited to have you here. Welcome to the AdTechGod pod.
Thank you. That was quite the intro. So happy to be here.
Yeah, same here, Ryan. Thank you. Thank you for making some time to be here today, and I'm really looking forward to chatting.
Yeah, me too. Fan from afar for a while, so this is kind of a big deal.
Same here. You know, who doesn't know Happens in AdOps and, you know, the growth story there, and, you know, that came out of nowhere and was an industry phenomenon. Like, it was incredible, you know?
Thank you. I don't even know what to say.
Ryan, I wanted to kickstart the conversation. You know, a lot of us have worked in this industry for some time, but it's really always nice to hear how people got into the industry and how they started. How did you get started in AdOps or get started in advertising or ad tech? And what brought you to becoming a VP at Conde Nast?
It feels like my career trajectory has been, you know, a little bit of hard work and a lot of really good luck. I got my very first job when I moved to New York City it was the end of August of 2008. It was this little startup company that just raised, I think, their Series A. They were an internet radio advertising platform for basically all the main like terrestrial sites, except for, I think, Clear Channel and obviously not Pandora. I point out the date and time because, so I moved to New York, it's end of August, and I think 2 weeks later, Lehman Brothers goes under. I didn't know it at the time, but I had basically just squeaked under what was going to be a massive recession and had joined a company that had just raised enough money to sort of last a little while. And so it was sort of my saving grace. But because while there, I started as, I think I was supposed to be like an inside salesperson, which is anyone who knows me knows I can't do sales. But I pivoted to a bit of an internal AdOps position. Fast forward about 12 months later, company can't raise money, have layoffs, and I find myself looking for a job. At the same time, it felt like the entire world was looking for a job. But I was able to start looking for ad operations roles, which again, I wasn't really familiar with except for this one company. But I managed to get a gig at this really mid-sized company, parlayed that into a gig at the New York Times, which was huge to me at the time because it was the first time I worked for a company that my parents or family or anyone even knew what that was, because none of them knew what ad operations was. And so at least being able to say I worked for the New York Times was kind of a big deal. And then honestly, what's so wild is there are so many people that I know now that have since gone on to help me. Again, I talk about the good luck. So my next role from there, I got this job at Warner Brothers, and that ended up being a pivotal role in my career. I learned how to manage people. I moved from manager to senior manager to director. I broke into this thing called programmatic. I started this thing called Happens in AdOps. And that entire thing doesn't happen if not for the fact that this woman who I just sort of worked next to at the New York Times and the hiring manager for Warner Brothers were best friends in college. So the woman that I interviewed at Warner Brothers called up this person at the New York Times. It's like, hey, do you know Ryan McConaghy? And that person, luckily for me, gave a really stellar review. And because of that, I kind of, I was able to grow and learn a whole lot more under a pretty large company. And so, yeah, Warner Brothers is sort of, I hold that one near to me because I learned so much there. It was a really cool time to be in ad tech. It was like 2014, 15, 16. Header bidding was starting. Again, I started this dumb little Tumblr blog with GIFs, and it really kind of blew up and also changed my career a bit because I was able to then start talking to really smart people like Ari Paparo, or I was talking to Beeler. I was talking to Chris Kane, and like just learning so much in that time. And then from there, I was able to, take all those learnings, briefly stopped over at Daily Motion, then went over to The Atlantic, where that's where I pivoted from sort of being the meme account and being a voice with maybe not as much knowledge behind it to actually learning what it is to run a large organization, what it is to have to make strategic decisions or sometimes uncomfortable decisions in ad tech for a company that was significant. It was resulted in people getting hired or maybe not. And so it's right around that time probably when I stopped tweeting as much or posting as much because things got real. I was there for about 5 years before I got again, how things work. That woman that gave me the stellar review at the New York Times, she ended up poaching me to come to Conde Nast. Rachel Savage, everyone knows her. She definitely a strong part of my career. So to her.
Do you feel with your career growth and obviously working at some of these big companies, you've learned a lot from all of your employers. Do you feel like you learned a lot from the Happens in AdOps network you built? Because I feel like I've learned a ton over the last few years, just like you said, interacting with people like, Ari Paparo and all the other kind of online influencers and entrepreneurs. I've learned a ton from these guys, a ton.
It's wild. I think I learned you don't necessarily get the depth that you do when you're working, when I was at the Atlantic or wherever else, but the breadth of knowledge and the different angles in which it's coming in from is stuff that you would never get elsewhere. And you're getting the type of people that are, again, some of the smartest in the industry are just actively reaching out to you. And that was the coolest thing to me, was having this ability to, if I needed to ping Andrew Casale, I knew how to do that, which there's just no way I would have known how to do that otherwise. And being able to talk to that person and see how much they knew, and you got to to ask questions. I don't know. It was the things I learned from that account. Were just people really care when you write about this industry. The responses I would get to the newsletter or the podcast or even the dumb GIFs was always so wild to me. And it's stuff that still to this day, people will come up to me and say things about it, which is kind of awesome. But then on top of it, and I'm sure you've learned this too, it's I became a better worker because of it. Cause you still had to show up. You still had to if I wanted to continue this thing, which I really enjoyed, still sometimes it was work to try to come up with a newsletter or write a funny thing or schedule a podcast. So that also I learned a degree of regimen that I'm glad I did, because when I was at that age, I didn't quite have it.
I think what, AdTechGod has done for me personally is, yes, the network, right? All the people I've been able to interact with. I ask people a lot of questions, mentioned Chris Kane, you mentioned Beeler, you mentioned Ari Paparo. There's so many people in this industry that know so much more than I do. It's that ability to send a DM and say, hey, look, what is this press release about? And is it really a big deal? I don't know what this means. And then them explaining it to me. Yeah, no, it's a huge deal that they're able to do this. This is actually really good. So it's even just the education I get from these guys that know so much more than I do on the technical side has helped me a ton. And then it seems like the industry overall, like Ryan, I'm sure you feel this too, is super supportive, like beyond supportive. It's kind of crazy how much support I get on a regular basis.
I think, it's so easy for the negative voice to be the one that sticks out, but like it's 99% positive. It is people who are either actively trying to educate you or help you or just like pat you on the back because they like a thing you did. It's really great. And I think it can feel like small. It can feel very, very small, but it's, 3, 4, 5,000. I don't know. You have so many followers that like, it's actually, your voice goes out a little further than you think.
Yeah, I've noticed. I mean, I think the other day I started getting a bunch of followers from Singapore, which was weird. So I started getting like University of Singapore, Singapore this, Singapore that, master's degree and bachelor's degree at Singapore. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? So some professor at the university at Singapore had shared my account, people who were studying marketing. So it was kind of cool. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like, it's kind of a nice thing to see happening.
Or like where all of a sudden like 20 different people from the same company would sign up and you're like, someone shared something.
Yeah. I was in someone's Slack channel. That's basically what happened. What do you feel, Ryan, with all your experience working at these companies, with happens in AdOps? Obviously, you're running a team over at Conde Nast, and you've been successful in your career in AdOps and in AdTech. What do you think has been the most pivotal moment for you that you feel like, wow, this was like the biggest achievement in my career, and I'm really proud of it?
There's a few. The earliest one that I'm most proud of is, for whatever reason, it was still fairly early. It wasn't a big deal at Warner Brothers at the time, but I really saw programmatic. I kind of understood what was going on there, but it wasn't part of my remit. But I made a play where I said, like, I want this. I was reading study break media blogs about how to properly A/B test your price floors. And it just like tickled a part of the engineering brain in me. I was like, oh, so this is more than just like handshakes and like sellers like making up things and me having to deal with it as an AdOps person. Like there's like a science here. So I making the play for that and then like working really, really hard to learn how to improve that and grow it and like up my game, and talking to people like Steph Laser, who always feels like she's like 5 years ahead of me to anything that I'm thinking of, was big. So that was one. And then the team that we built at The Atlantic was, for a time, I would say probably the best operators and yield minds in the industry. And I mean that no insult to, I'm sure there are plenty of really, really good ones, but I was working next to this woman, Jess Mason, who has more experience than me, is more in the weeds than me. So like getting to like match wits with someone who also has like 10 or 15 years of experience in the like minutia of ad tech, we were doing some really interesting things over there. And like the types of stuff we built, I still haven't seen much elsewhere. And I've heard a few companies in the past like 2 years try to like build it themselves. But I was really, really proud of that Atlantic team because of the culture we built there. I'm really proud of what we're doing at Conde to do the same thing, which is to take, what may have at one point been a very legacy print org and really bring them into a advanced, sophisticated, like yield, direct sold, programmatic data team. And it's been really fun. It's stuff like that I'm like the happens in AdOps stuff. I got lucky. I put a dumb GIF out there, and one day there were 300 viewers, and the next day it was 50,000. Great, caught lightning in a bottle there. But like, I'm actually proud of like the work done and the teams, because like I've seen how those can get tamped down, or like the wrong leadership or the wrong incentive structure can really make people fight against each other, work against that, put out a worse product. But it really felt like the past 5 or 6 years between Conde and The Atlantic have been like really, really great work, and hopefully improving things in general.
Well, I think when you're surrounded with supporters and you're surrounded with good leadership and executive level, you're obviously a VP, but obviously at the C level. I mean, if you have good leaders who are building the right type of culture, looking at a longer term vision of the company, and then them giving you the trust and the controls to do what's right, in terms of hiring the right people and getting the right processes in place. Like work shouldn't be all that stressful. It should be fun, right? You should be able to work with your colleagues and see success without the politics and the battles between coworkers. So it seems like you're in a very good spot and you guys have created a really good culture.
So let people feel safe being weird. Let people feel safe being wrong. Let people at any level tell you, the VP or whoever, that like, hey, I think you're wrong here, or like, why did you do that? And you can be shocked at the quality of work that comes out and the ideas that just you would never have thought of that can come out from, you've hired incredibly bright people. Let them be incredibly bright. Let them do that thing.
I know all about being weird, Ryan. I get it. I mean, I also think you make a good point. I think, having employees that feel empowered to provide their input, their opinions, or even to question your decisions obviously in a nice, polite way, right? Like, hey, I'm not sure if that's the right move. Like, I'm thinking maybe we should do it this way. Like, that's huge because that makes everybody think and that helps everybody get the decision that's going to be best for the business.
Exactly. It's okay to challenge it. And sometimes, like, as a leader, you have to learn, like, sometimes I'm going to disappoint you. Sometimes I can't do the thing that you want to do, or sometimes we can't do it as fast as we want to do it. And it's good to learn how to, feel that as the person being disappointed and how to then still come to work and put in the work. And as a leader, how to feel that and then like let that drive you to be better.
So, I mean, Ryan, you obviously like this industry. So I'm going to ask you, like, why do you love ad tech so much? I know I love ad tech, but I'm curious why you love ad tech.
I am pretty well known as a cynic. So I think this is a fun question because I like it because it fits a lot of the things that I'm naturally good at and not the things that I'm bad. I'm naturally pretty logically oriented, pretty decent with math, can think through systems. But what I really like is that, like, ultimately ad tech is still a human problem. If you're ever wondering, like, why did this company do this or why are we this way? Like, follow the incentive structure and learn a bit of the history and you can probably piece it together. And so what has always helped me is, instead of focusing on whatever everyone is talking about right now, trying to focus a bit on like why or what happens next. And it's usually a lot more interesting and a lot less fraught. I love ad tech because, like, the least obvious thing is usually the best thing. I like to do this game when I take my teams to offsites where I ask, like, what is the worst possible idea we could have for X, whatever it is? And you'll be shocked at how often that turns into the best possible answer. And like, do that with ad tech. Like, what's the worst possible way to fix privacy and targeting? I'm not going to have an answer for that. But like, if you play that around in your head, what you come up with is probably closer to what actually is going to be the truth in 3 years than whatever you're reading in the 18 different industry journals that are writing about it right now.
You bring up a pretty hot topic, which is, privacy. And now that the cookies are deleted again, privacy compliance is a big deal. Cookies are a big deal. But what do you think, has tailwinds behind it over the next, 12 to 18 months with so much change related to, privacy compliance across the board?
I'm not going to be the first one to say this, but I love what I'm seeing out of Chris Kane, out of Jounce. I love any conversation about MFA. Somehow I've always struggled with, like, how do you quantify quality? Because until you can do that, until a buyer can click a button in a DSP and target quality, I always felt like there was never a way for it to, like, it was just never going to happen. It was going to be this pipe dream. It was going to be this thing that people railed about, but just never happened. But there's like 3 or 4 other companies, I apologize, I'm not up on your names, that are out there that are like really making a good play to like point this out or point out where people are abusing this. The buy side is now paying attention to it. It's bringing the sell side up to task on why, pipes are still allowed to these companies. So I love the work there. I love any work that is about doing less in this industry. I think we so easily complicate things and add more ad units or more complex or make the page heavier or more trackers or whatever. So any play that shows that doing less of that and how to smartly do less of that and still make your number or improve experience, or, I think ad tech does this thing where, like, in the 90s when everyone was so obsessed with like low fat diets, it turned out that all they were doing was replacing fat with sugar. And it actually, you just took one problem and made it a different one. It feels like ad tech does that over and over and over again, instead of looking at the like holistic nutrition. And so I love anytime I can sense someone kind of pushing against that slim fast narrative and going more towards like a, eat real food type thing.
I like your point that, that simplifying sometimes is the easiest and the best way to do things. You mentioned, how do you qualify quality? But like historically, we looked at it as like, is your viewability? What's your viewability? How's your engagement? Is it brand safe? But we were kind of ignoring a big part of that, which are, viewability can be toyed with, right? MFAs play a big role in just getting the clicks and the impressions that you need because it's, a super high ratio of ads to content. And he was toying with that, definition of quality because it was hitting the metrics that I think advertisers wanted. And I think, Chris and Joust and so many others in the industry have done such a good job at raising awareness that, hey, like this is actually not good inventory. The numbers are good, but they are good for a bad reason. And we should address that and be cleaner in how we do our SPO and how we partner with publishers across the board.
Yeah. I mean, I think Jeff Bezos has this quote in which you worry about the process becoming the proxy. So he's saying like people worry about getting the process right and not necessarily getting the result that they're going for. And I think we allowed sort of the metric to become the proxy. So viewability became a proxy for a quality ad result, where the quality ad result is I assume as the buyer, you get either the top of funnel growth that you want, or you get that bottom of funnel return on ad spend that you want. Like that's the result that you're worrying about. And yes, viewability plays a part in it, but to your point, viewability can be gamed. Any single metric can be gamed. The industry, I mean, it's really easy to sell viewability. It's harder to sell this broad notion of MFA. And so I appreciate anyone that's fighting that fight.
Same here. What do you, as an industry leader, as an ad operations monetization leader in the industry, what advice would you give to people who are maybe not as senior as you, right? Have been in the industry for a few years. They look at themselves as ad operations folks. And I interviewed Jared Wilashinsky from Paramount, who's a great guy, and he had a great perspective on things. But what would you tell people who are a little earlier in their career who, find themselves in this ad operations role and say, I don't know where I'm heading, or I don't know how to learn more, or I don't know how to keep up?
Honestly, learn as much as you can early on in your first gig and then jump to the next. I know it goes against a lot of things I'm sure a lot of people want, but like the only way to really learn, especially early in your career, is to experience it. So one of the things that I hear from is people that have been in a given role, whether it's an analyst or in operations or like a media planning role, and they've been in it for like 4 or 5 years and they feel kind of stuck. And then what I want to tell them is like, you are. So see if you can find yourself a role either within your company or in another company that is a little bit of what you're doing plus, or 75% of what you're doing now plus 25% of something else. That is what helped me. It was AdOps, it was AdOps. It was AdOps and vendor management. It was AdOps and yield reporting. And it was AdOps, vendor management, yield reporting, and programmatic. And like, whenever you get those new things, like dig in, ask questions. There is no industry leader that would not answer a question from someone at their company or even just someone randomly reaching out to them. I think everyone thinks we're like inundated with questions, and I'm sure you are, but like, I think, and probably like the biggest names, but there are so many people, like if you just ping them and ask to like take them out to coffee or just ask a question, they'll say yes. They've always said yes to me. It's stuff like that where like, don't take a single advice from a voice on a podcast. Ask a bunch of people. I think it's really, really easy to feel like, oh, these people are too busy or they're too important or like my problem is not big enough or whatever, and just like silently suffer a little bit or like think maybe it's not for me. But like, man, there's so many ways to work in this industry and there's so many different paths, and no one got into ad operations, as far as I'm aware, via college because of a degree. Like everyone finds their way there accidentally. So like there's so many different paths to take.
I have a friend of mine that's in a leadership role in ad operations. It's a new leadership role. I'd say probably a couple of years now. Prior to that, he was an individual contributor, just, AdOps guy, trafficking what he had to traffic, do what he had to do, worked at multiple good companies, but he was stuck. I mean, he was like, man, I'm stuck. I don't know how I'm ever going to grow. And he took a leap of faith and went to another company where, they told him you'd have one direct report. And now he's blowing up. I mean, he's doing great. He's got a full team, hiring, expanding, getting more pay, better title. But he was the same. He went from just general ad operation stuff to programmatic stuff to, partner management stuff. And, the hardest thing for him, I think, was moving from what is an individual contributor to a people manager. And he's like, oh, I'm always so busy. I'm like, you got to learn how to delegate. But you have to hand off some things.
They teach you how to become a really good individual contributor. How to manage and then how to manage managers is just a very different thing.
Totally different ballgame. Well, Ryan, that actually brings us to the end of the podcast. And I really wanted to thank you for your time, and thank you to Conde Nast for having you here as well.
Thank you so much for having me. This was awesome.
And I'm a huge fan of Happens in AdOps. So thank you, and keep doing it. I follow it all the time. So
awesome.
I love what's going on there.
Thank you.
Speak soon. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the AdTechGod Pod, a podcast for the people, about the people that make ad tech great. Stay connected with me for more insights, trends, and interviews in the realm of ad tech. Don't miss out on our latest updates, so follow me on X, Instagram, and connect with me on LinkedIn. Don't forget, ATG Slack community has insights, networking opportunities, and jobs. Keep the conversation going and stay at the forefront of ad tech innovation.